It's week 3 of Futurama's return. The third episode of Futurama's latest revival season is called How the West Was 10100001, which is an excellent title, might I add. And it features some of that dreaded topicality, or dreaded to some Futurama fans. But the episode dives headfirst into not only some topical subject matter, but a full-on Old West themed storyline. And there is tons to go over.
Old West. Got it.
But first, I want to thank today's video sponsor, Factor. Factor is an amazing meal order service that delivers fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals directly to your doorstep. I am so excited that Factor is sponsoring this video because this is actually a service I use personally. For over a year, I've been getting weekly boxes of Factor delivered to me. I am a really busy guy, and it can be so hard to maintain good eating habits with such a jam-packed schedule, but Factor makes it so easy to make sure I've got quality, nutritious meals stocked in my fridge. They're also incredibly flexible, so if you're heading out of town or just aren't going to be eating at home as often, you can order fewer meals or pause your order for a week entirely. There are over 34 different meals to choose from, and they have such a wide variety of not only types of meals, but styles of diet: keto, protein plus, vegetarian, etc. I personally like to order meals under their protein plus label as an easy way to pair more protein with my workouts. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code J2Cellos50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Once again, that code is J2Cellos50 at factor75.com. Get 50% off your first order today. Okay, so this was an episode that people seemed to be concerned about after the trailers because of its focus on cryptocurrency, and I do understand why people are fearful of topical storylines, but outside of a couple things, I actually think this is kind of the perfect example of how Futurama should be handling topical subject matter. They take a modern concept like cryptocurrency, but rather than just do commentary on the concept, you build out a fun-themed storyline and really lean into it. In this case, Futurama opts to liken the crypto rush to the 1800s California gold rush. Then they take this a step further and give us a fully Old West themed episode of Futurama.
Old West. Got it.
Sure, there are a few on-the-nose crypto jokes / commentary, but overall they used it as a means to build out an interesting world and storyline that are really only tangentially related. That being said, there are definitely some aspects I wish had been handled a tad differently. Since this takes place in 3023, I kind of wish they had opted to use fictional cryptocurrencies rather than just actual ones like Bitcoin and Ethereum.
The price of Bitcoin.
What?
The virtual money is soaring once again, leading to a high-tech gold rush.
Those specificities are the kinds of things that can make an episode feel a bit dated to me. We understand the concept of cryptocurrency, and I think it would have been pretty easy to just make up some future versions. But luckily, this is all sort of a small part of the episode, as it dives headfirst into the Old West theme pretty quickly.
Old West. Got it.
And for the parts that do revolve around crypto, the Futurama writers lean into the most scientific aspects of it as a focus, with the crew attempting to mine the element thallium for the crypto mining chips. But the Old West stuff is fun, and I have to give them credit for something that made me roll my eyes in the marketing, but I've since realized is actually really clever, naming the town Doge City, a mashup of the Doge crypto coin and Dodge City, the famous Old West town. There are some fun explanations for why everything ends up being so low tech like the Old West. The professor explains that the mines are using so much power that the atmosphere is being ionized, with a cool animated visual to boot. Because of this, they can't fly the ship and have to drive.
Well, every watt of electricity goes to the Bitcoin mining computers. For everyone else, it's practically like living in the Old West.
So while they're all in Doge City, they have to find different roles in the low-tech town. Leela ends up working at the tavern / brothel. Zoidberg just steals the doctor's office after the other doctor was killed by Roberto. Speaking of Roberto, I really love how they westernize him in this one. The gun that shoots knives in particular is so funny.
Out here in the West, I need something shootier, like this gun knife I invented stole.
In general, it's pretty fun to see the characters in cowboy cosplay, but there are also some pretty great original designs. I'm kind of obsessed with this piano-playing robot. This feels like such a classic Futurama design to me. They also bring back the Borax Kid, who obviously fits in perfectly here, but the Borax Kid is such an interesting case in Futurama. He's just about the only recurring character who was introduced in the Comedy Central era, first introduced in Newtopia, with subsequent appearances in Zap Dingbat and Assy Come Home. And their focus on his gambling and cheating has has been consistent in all of his appearances. This was his very first mention.
Thanks to you, I lost my bet with the Borax Kid.
Then in Zap Dingbat, we see him winning a big pot with a hand in poker at the Most Def Cantina, and in Assy Come Home, he's using Bender's arms to also cheat at poker. Though strangely, at the end of Newtopia, the Borax Kid is drawn at a pretty significantly larger scale than he is in later appearances. He's kind of just towering over the other characters here, but then after this, he's basically human-sized. Though with some great attention to detail, at the end of Newtopia, the Borax Kid proclaims that he has to leave because the Feldspar Queen is taking off, and then when we see him in Assy Comes Home, he's gambling on a space riverboat casino called the Feldspar Queen. But it's weird that there were so few recurring characters introduced in the Comedy Central era, and it makes me wonder if we're going to get any new ones in the Hulu era. But this episode utilizes all we know about the Borax Kid pretty effectively. He's seen to be an active card cheat, once again playing poker, but this time in the Old West Tavern. By the end of the episode, Fry calls him out for plagiarizing this series of young adult novels from Buffalo Blue Cobalt. The Borax Kid generally seems to be dishonestly making a quick buck. This episode also features a nice little Dwight and Hermes subplot, which I really like to see, especially because Dwight has gotten exactly zero focus since maybe Bender's Game. He makes brief appearances in Comedy Central era episodes, but nothing substantial at all. This is probably the most Dwight-focused subplot we've gotten since the Fox era's 300 Big Boys. In another nice example of the writers paying attention to continuity, we see Hermes really panic and protect Dwight when he sees Roberto.
Who's that? A psychotic killer, that's who? Get down!
Hermes has very specific first-hand experience with Roberto in the $6 Million Mon, after Roberto's mugging inspires Hermes to start replacing parts of his body with robot parts. And that shared history with Roberto, I think, makes Dwight's betrayal all the more painful for Hermes in this episode, and it's pretty funny that Dwight shows adoration for Roberto. There were parts of the subplot I really liked, like when Roberto tries to use Dwight to rob a bank stagecoach, but it just ends up running him over. I think giving Dwight a little bit of an angsty teen stage works well here, and he knows exactly how to cut Hermes deep with his love of Roberto and rebuke of Limbo.
Limbo stupid? Where did I go wrong?
Probably when you took up Limbo. From what I'm hearing, it's stupid.
And the big final sequence where Dwight limbos under gunfire to save his dad really worked for me. I feel like we haven't gotten enough Hermes and Dwight father-son moments overall in the series.
I love you, Pops. And Limbo is not entirely stupid.
I will say, Dwight does seem to be another voice that is suffering a bit from the aging of the voice actors. He was played by Bumper Robinson in the first two appearances, but he's been voiced by Phil Lamar ever since, and you can definitely hear Phil's age a bit this time, but it is more noticeable in some places than it is in others. I think Bender's subplot might be the one that didn't do all that much for me here. I actually kind of like the idea of him bonding with an animal, in this case a donkey, but they didn't do all that much with it. I was not a huge fan of the song and musical sequence that they had together here, though I do like the way they animated the donkey singing along with Bender. I feel like Futurama wrote some banger songs early on, but have not managed to recapture the magic of stuff like the Bureaucrat song from How Hermes Requisitioned His Groove Back. Hey, now's actually a good time to remind you, if you want more Futurama analysis outside of this breakdown, make sure to check out my podcast, Cartoons That Curse. My co-host Tariq and I have covered the entire series of Futurama, including the newest episodes, and we'll be covering the rest of this season weekly, episode by episode, so go check it out.
Subscribe.
I've seen some people critical again of Leela's characterization here, but I actually don't think I agree. I definitely had issues with how she was handled in parts of last week's episode, but I think people aren't really taking the context of this story into account here. People have issues with her being flirtatious with the Borax Kid, but I saw this as the characters embracing their Old West roles, with Leela working at the tavern/brothel. And obviously it was all meant to help really put an emphasis on this final moment between Fry and Leela. I think this episode has some pretty strong jokes as well. We got very brief but strong moments from the robot mafia, who are Farnsworth's loan brokers.
We're also leg brokers.
I enjoyed Fry just having absolutely zero clue what a brothel is.
A brothel?
A soup kitchen?
Roberto playing the knife game where you stab around your fingers, but with his knife gun, got a good chuckle out of me. But man, my biggest laugh might have been the return of Farnsworth's short-lived catchphrase.
I'd take a shift myself, but I am already in my pajamas.
This catchphrase was used only twice in the first and second episodes of the entire show, at which point it was abandoned for some reason. This is the first time it has resurfaced in over 24 years, and I personally always loved this catchphrase, so its long-awaited return is super welcomed for me. I hope they fully bring it back and embrace it, and I really enjoyed the final stretch of the episode, especially conceptually. The big twist is that the tavern's back room isn't really a brothel, it's a server room filled with kidnapped disembodied robot heads that are being used to mine Bitcoin.
That's actually a pretty reasonable use case for robot heads.
I think this is a pretty cool way to mash up Futurama lore with real-life aspects of crypto culture, but I think executionally, the highlight of the episode has gotta be the big final shootout sequence. Basically a 6-way duel in the middle of Doge City. The Borax Kid vs. Fry, who's mad at the BK for plagiarizing his books. Bender taking on Delilah, who stole his head to mine crypto. And this old dude versus the piano robot, who just wants him to shut up. But the way they move the camera around the sequence as everyone tries to take each other out is really cool. Probably the coolest piece of animation so far this season, and it utilizes some really nice looking 3D character models. Usually these really stand out, kind of like a sore thumb, but I think they look pretty dang good here. It's a fun, action-packed climax, and it caps off a solid episode. Overall, I'm once again mostly happy with how this one came together. I think a lot of people feared that a crypto episode could have been a disaster, but they took this one in such a different direction that really gave it its own identity outside of that topicality. The Old West theming is really fun visually, but it especially sounded great with some incredible music composition from Christopher Ting. The Hermes and Dwight storyline had a nice cap that worked well for me, and this was probably the most I've ever enjoyed the Borax Kid as a character. That being said, the episode didn't blow me away or anything either. I think I'd probably call it my least favorite of the 3 released so far, but I also still think it's generally stronger than the earliest Comedy Central era stuff. It feels to me like the Hulu era is developing a bit of its own identity, similar to how the other eras of the show feel pretty distinct, and I kinda think that's a good thing. Expecting a show to feel exactly like it did when it was being made 10 or 20 years ago is not realistic. As times change and writers get older and rotate, series are born and reborn, they'll just go through different phases, and so far this has been an interesting one. I think there are maybe some regrowing pains in a few ways, and they still have yet to release an episode that has truly blown me away the way the late Philip J. Fry did in the first Comedy Central run, but I'm still more encouraged than discouraged about this newest era of the series. It feels like there's just a lot of potential for this run to really grow into itself and deliver some new classics, but I guess we'll see. Before I go, I also want to once again shout out the writers and actors strikes. Please show your support for the creatives who make these shows possible. I'll be posting a link in the description for resources that can help support the striking workers, and I still want to hear what you think about the latest Futurama episode and the new season in general. Are you enjoying it more or less than the beginning of the Comedy Central era? Did the way this episode handled its topicality work for you? Let me know below in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Peace.
Old West. Got it.
I stay mellow watching Johnny Two Cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny Two Cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.